The Black Sea coast, Turkey. Beautiful views? Absolutely. You could watch them forever. But if you step a little away from the shore, it turns out Turkey's coastal areas have more to show off than just the views. Tons of insect, bird, mammal, and amphibian species, plus loads of plant life. And among all this richness, there are plenty of endemics. That is, species that live only here. But there's also a coastal area called Zonguldak Province, where green views hide a long history of coal mining, which means many places don't have the nature they once did. Here, the soil's damaged, along with a bunch of other things. Stuff that looks like it's beyond repair. However, in reality, the rescue was always pretty close with the local herders, and it's the buffaloes. Big animals that don't really look like they could bring any good changes. Still, they managed to turn the damaged land into a hot spot of biodiversity. How exactly? That's what we're going to tell you about today. If you're walking somewhere across the Turkish lands and spot a body of water or wetlands, chances are there might be buffaloes around. To be more specific, we're talking about water buffaloes or Anatolian ones. That's the name folks in Turkey gave them. No scientific reason, just because of the location. The high chance of seeing the animal in the water shows that it really loves being in it. And also that buffaloes in Turkey aren't some rare or endangered species. According to the statistical bulletin from Turkey's Ministry of Agriculture and Forestry, by the end of 2024, there were 162,051 buffaloes roaming the country. That might seem like a decent number, but let's take a look at how many of these animals live in other countries. Let's take Bangladesh, for example. As of 2017, there were over 1.8 million buffaloes wandering around there. Looking at the neighboring Nepal, in 2015, they counted all the animals and then issued a report saying the country is home to more than 836,500 buffaloes. So the conclusion is clear. In Turkey, which is bigger in area than Nepal and Bangladesh combined, there aren't that many buffaloes. Yes, in most South Asian countries, water buffaloes are native animals, and when it comes to modern-day Turkey, even though they've been around for thousands of years, they were actually brought there by people. Yes, different countries have different conditions and ways of dealing with these animals. All of that explains the differences between the populations. But the important thing here is this: Turkey's currently working on bringing back the Anatolian buffalo population. There was a time when their situation was really dire. Back in the 1970s, about 1 million buffaloes were chilling somewhere in Turkey's wetlands. Then in 2010, local herders did a head count and were shocked. They found only 85,000 left. The reason for such a massive change, as is often the case, lies in people's drive to develop, disregarding the damage to the environment. Wetlands and shallow lakes get in the way of farming and other activities, so more often than not, they were just drained. We said that buffaloes just like standing in water, but actually it's way more serious than that. They simply need to regulate their body temperature using water. In other words, for these animals, lakes and wetlands are environments they just can't live without. It's no coincidence they're called water buffaloes. As small ponds and marshes have shrunk, so has their population. Besides, people, especially in the last century, took pride in doing intensive farming, meaning they didn't rotate crops but kept draining the soil's resources endlessly, so the soil could get ruined and nothing would grow in it anymore. This, of course, also affected the buffalo population, since they need not only to stand in water, but also to roam around eating plants. Then the buffalo numbers did start going up thanks to big investments in improving the environment, as well as the demand for bringing animals from other countries. By the way, some of these measures are still happening now, because the country really aims to bring buffaloes back to their lands. So, for example, in Tokat, located in northern Turkey, there's a project run by the Buffalo Breeders Association and Tokat University with support from the Ministry of Agriculture and Forestry. Under this project, they're breeding buffaloes, which has bumped up the herd size in the area from 200 to 1,000 over the last decade. Maybe people could be encouraged to raise more animals too. There's some progress in that direction, although livestock farmers would rather raise cows. However, the Food, Agriculture, and Livestock Ministry is ready to pay up. If you have a buffalo, you get 800 Turkish liras, or $20. There's also a plan where the herder gets 350 liras for a calf older than 4 months and 500 liras for an adult animal. Plus, these animals cover their own breeding costs. Just like cows, buffaloes produce milk too. Only it's pricier. Speaking of the same buffaloes raised in central Turkey, cow's milk costs 2 liras and buffalo's milk 10 liras. So it's 5 times more expensive. This is explained by the higher fat content compared to the cow version. In particular, this feature lets them make kaymak, a local treat that can also be sold. But money isn't the only reason why Turkey's been trying hard to bring back a bigger population of buffaloes. The thing is, the buffalo is proven to be an animal that can turn even places ruined by human activity into hotspots of biodiversity. All this happened on the land near the shore of the Black Sea in the province called Zonguldak. In the past century, and the one before that, coal mining was really common here. What's more, the province's capital, also called Zonguldak, was actually founded as a port city to make shipping the resource from nearby coal mines easier. Because of heavy coal mining, a lot of areas in the province turned into places where all the wetlands dried up. They just got in the way of mining. The habitat's rescue came from where no one expected it. Many mines closed after their resources ran out, and buffaloes, which were raised nearby and then released by local herders, started coming to their land more often and for longer stays. What attracted the animals? When the mines were being worked, shallow pits naturally formed. After mining stopped at some places, these hollows filled up with rainwater. Remember, in Turkey, they raise water buffaloes, animals that just love standing in water. Well, these rainwater-filled pits became their cool-down spots. That's basically how it looked. Meanwhile, the buffalo lies around everywhere, turning into a manure factory, which makes many bugs like flies see it as a perfect target and constantly swarm its huge body. In the end, the buffalo becomes a sort of transport that carries insects from one place to another. In our case today, the buffaloes that came to hang out in the rain-filled pits brought all kinds of insects with them. However, by choosing the buffalo as their ride, the insects are basically signing their own death sentence, since other animals have also learned to adapt to what's happening in nature. According to one study where a group of people checked who could be found on the Anatolian buffalo, it turned out that in 10 out of 12 cases, there were marsh frogs on them. Yeah, right there along with the flies. The thing is, if at some point amphibians are hanging out with insects on the buffalo, it's only temporary because frogs jump on buffalo for just one reason: to eat all the flying and crawling critters living on the horned animal. And this is one example of commensalism, or mutually beneficial cooperation. Buffaloes don't really like the bugs that constantly bite them. Frogs protect the animals from suffering and at the same time get their food. But these aren't the only passengers on the buffalo, because there are also plants and seeds. Unlike the bugs and frogs, these passengers pretty much didn't have any choice whether to ride or not. The buffalo just wandered through existing wetlands and picked up all sorts of plants and seeds on itself. And finally, the buffalo reaches those very water-filled pits near the abandoned coal mines. It's hot outside, so he happily heads straight into the water. As you can imagine, some of his passengers hop off right there where their hoofed ride stopped, and then frogs with insects can settle in a pond where no one lived before the buffalo came. At the same time, the buffalo will be dropping manure near the pond or right in it, which gives the insects a perfect spot to lay their larvae. For example, flies do this since manure is a perfect place for growing little flies. Frogs are happy too since they can settle in a new spot where there'll be even more food like flies and other bugs. And let's not forget about the seeds. Since the buffaloes carried them from the wetlands, they're made to grow in a similar environment, which are the water-filled pits. What if a buffalo brings seeds of some invasive plant on itself? In places like this, for example, a reed like this one, Arundo donax, can easily take hold. It's called highly invasive because it can grow nearly 4 inches a day and spread like crazy. This species quickly and effectively pushes out all the other plants native to the area. This plant, Pontederia crassipes, or common water hyacinth, is invasive too. It grows fast, pushing out local species, and it also affects photosynthesis, or phytoplankton, as well as underwater plants and algae, stunting their growth. Besides that, both of these plants can actually lead to the disappearance of a body of water. For example, reeds can suck up 660 to 1,060 gallons of water over 2.5 acres per day, and the hyacinth speeds up evaporation. Sounds dangerous? Don't worry, the buffalo can handle it. It can eat 26 pounds of grass a day. Yeah, even though the animal itself spreads unwanted plants, it also eats them up effectively, clearing the area for other types of flora. And don't forget, buffaloes are manure factories, which is like a natural fertilizer for plants. So the animal both brought plants into water-filled pits near the coal mines and gave a growth boost. So what's the result? Over time, the empty pits that filled with water turned into wetlands, home to insects and amphibians typical for that kind of habitat, and plants grow there too. At the same time, each element of the environment perfectly complements the others. Someone's missing here, like birds, for example. For many feathered creatures, Turkey and its Black Sea coast are part of their breeding grounds and also lie along their migration routes. The white stork, for instance, flies to Africa for the winter, but before that it breeds and lives exactly where there are rain-filled pits near abandoned coal mines. One of its feeding spots is shallow wetlands. Its diet can include amphibians like frogs, as well as various insects. Overall, man-made shallow water-filled pits that have been transformed by buffaloes are just the perfect place. Another bird is the crane. Many crane species rely on shallow wetlands, and most of them actually nest there. Their diet includes amphibians and insects just the same, but this bird also eats plants, which are plenty in the habitat created by buffalo, and there are tons of these birds. Some don't just land on the wetlands created by the buffaloes, they actually perch right on the animals. In the end, just like with frogs, a mutually beneficial relationship forms between two different creatures. The buffalo offers food in the form of insects, and the birds save it from constant bites. And the result? The buffalo helped create a new habitat in Zonguldak province, and people learn that with these animals they can fix the damage they've caused, turning lifeless areas into places full of life. You know why we can be sure that Turkey will keep actively increasing its buffalo population? Because they're seen as one of the main protectors of the Kızılırmak River. More specifically, its delta, the place where the river flows into the Black Sea in the Bafra, a town in the Samsun region. It includes the largest wetland area in the region and one of the biggest in the country. Turkey considers these wetlands critically important. The river delta is a key bird habitat, a major plant area, and finally a crucial biodiversity hotspot. And that's no coincidence. Wetlands covering a total of 53,600 acres are home to 500 plant species, along with 33 out of the 160 mammal species found in Turkey, plus a huge number of insect species, plenty of amphibians and fish. Since the river delta is located where birds nest and migrate along the Black Sea coast, as many as 352 bird species live here. And here we've got today's heroes, water buffaloes. As one of the professors from a nearby university puts it, the very existence of these animals is basically the same as the existence of the delta. That became quite clear in the last century. According to the 1990 census, 10,000 buffaloes lived here, but the Kızılırmak River Delta is one of the country's main farming areas, so the animals had the bad luck of running into humans. Chemical pesticides and ruthless farming methods on rice paddies and other land started to take their toll, and as a result, over the next few years, the 10,000-strong population shrank to just 2,800 individuals. The condition of the delta began to worsen, which made it necessary to bring back those who used to protect it, those whose very existence is tied to the delta zone. Besides that, in the river delta, buffaloes acted as natural canal diggers, connecting different patches of wetlands to each other that help fish to spread. Yep, buffaloes help even underwater creatures. On top of that, in the case of the Kızılırmak River Delta, they were also protectors of wet meadows. Buffaloes simply eat young trees and other plants, which stops the meadows from getting overgrown, and meadows are another hotspot of biodiversity, just like wetlands. During active efforts, the Turks managed to boost the population from 2,800 individuals to 12,000 as of 2021. The delta still has its problems, even with that number of animals, but things have definitely improved. Obviously, the Turks will try to avoid another population drop. What's more, there are now lots of programs aimed at increasing the number of buffaloes, so there's no need to worry about the restored wetlands near the abandoned coal mines either. And at this point, oddly enough, it's worth mentioning that buffaloes aren't always a good thing. To prove that, we need to go to a country where dozens of animal species were brought in, only to turn into a curse. Yes, we're talking about Australia. In the 19th century, buffaloes were brought to the Northern Territory for meat. And as is often the case in Australia with non-native animals, things didn't go as planned. The settlements in the north were abandoned and no one kept the buffaloes in check, which led to them spreading all over northern Australia. Combined with Australia's tough climate and the fact that local plants and animals weren't used to buffaloes, this caused serious damage to many areas. For example, buffaloes have destroyed Aboriginal hunting grounds and sacred sites on the river floodplains near the community of Maningrida in western Arnhem Land. Herds trample water paths and also dig out plenty of swimming channels, which in places like Turkey are actually good for nature. But in Australia, the unchecked digging by buffaloes wrecks the vegetation, erodes the soil, and lets salt water seep into freshwater spots. All of this, of course, affects the animals. For example, as the local ranger says, the buffaloes destroyed the habitat of crocodiles and long-necked turtles. On top of that, the buffaloes had a bad effect on the population of magpie geese, which are an important food source for the nearby communities. Yes, Australia is trying to deal with its wild buffaloes in different ways, including sending them to other countries. For instance, between 2014 and 2019, from 3,000 to 9,000 wild buffalo were exported to Southeast Asia. A large number of animals are shot and processed for meat. Still, as of 2019 estimates, natural population growth was about 27,000 animals a year, which is way too much. Current measures just aren't enough. So it turns out one country's trying to save buffaloes from extinction, while another's trying to stop being overrun by these massive animals. And both Turkey and Australia are trying to fix other people's mistakes. Probably in situations like this, it makes sense to team up. That's the only way to handle the problem most effectively.